Welcome to Senior Living Visionaries, a podcast for senior living leaders who are looking to stay ahead of the curve in the industry. On this show, we feature leaders and innovators in senior living who are pushing the boundaries and creating new, effective services and solutions. And now, let's settle in as host Jennifer Drago connects us with today's guests.
So welcome to Senior Living Visionaries, where we showcase the leaders and innovators who are shaping the future of senior living. I'm your host, Jennifer Drago, strategy consultant and CEO of Peak Profit. And today I have two wonderful guests with me. I have JD Shuman, who is the president and CEO of the Asbury Foundation. JD began his career with the Asbury Foundation, serving the Bethany Village community in 2007. He began leading the Asbury Foundation as president and CEO in 2019. With more than 20 years in older adult services, JD finds value in partnering with a donor to fulfill their philanthropic passion within their home. And I'm so excited to speak to JD today, and to Andrew, who is our other guest, also from the Asbury Group. Andrew Jeanneret is responsible for overseeing finance and accounting functions of Asbury's not-for-profit system and affiliated entities. With more than 3 decades of experience in finance, he has held senior financial and accounting positions within the healthcare, accounting, pharmaceutical, biotechnology, insurance, and technology industries over the course of his career. He joined Asbury in 2017. He received his bachelor's degree in accounting from Boston College and his MBA in international business and finance from George Washington University, and he's a CPA. And I'm married to a CPA, so warm space in my heart for CPAs.
Great.
And JD, I didn't have your educational background, but do you want to share your alma mater? Or
Sure.
Yeah.
So it was Bloomsburg University and Strayer University is where I got my degrees. Yeah.
Awesome. And that's great. Thank you guys both so much. And JD, would you like to share a little bit more about Asbury and the Asbury Foundation for those who aren't familiar?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So Asbury is a diversified services organization. We provide residential, assisted, and skilled nursing services to older adults in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Tennessee. We also provide therapy, pharmacy, services, as well as home health and home care to residents, and IT services, really, to older adult organizations across really the country. The Asbury Foundation is the philanthropic arm for Asbury communities. Our mission is to secure charitable support that enhances the lives of the Asbury family, including both resident and associates. Our value proposition is to align donor passion to transformational opportunities, and we like to think ourselves as the third leg of that revenue stool for our CCRC division, meaning that revenue comes in either government, resident rates and fees and ancillary services, and then philanthropy. So we play a critical role in Asbury's financial status, so to speak.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And for those senior living executives who may have a foundation arm as well, can you give us an idea of kind of the size of your foundation, both in terms of production or however you measure that, and staff?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So over the last few years, we've been fortunate enough to grow our team from what had been about 8 individuals to 13 individuals today. And that growth in staffing has come alongside growth in philanthropic revenue. We had been a $5 or $6 million a year foundation, and over the last 2 years, we've seen 11.7 and $10.7 million raised. And this year we're at, I think as of the end of last month, we were at 7 million. So our philanthropy has definitely increased alongside that growth in staffing.
Awesome. And I'm sure we're going to talk about some of the reasons for that, but I really, my gut is telling me it has a lot to do with how you've organized your strategy and the opportunities that you're making available to your residents and others. So this is awesome. So let's just start right there. So JD, do you want to tell us about Asbury's philanthropic pillars? You have a strategic plan, and I know you organize the work that you do by, I think you call them pillars, and how they were developed. Tell us more.
Yeah, you bet. So it was 2019 when we first started investigating how philanthropy impacts Asbury and how we might uh, leverage that in even bigger and better ways. So we worked alongside our Asbury Foundation board to develop a new strategic plan for the foundation, and it officially was approved in September of 2020. And that plan really, it pulled us from this world of benevolent care being our who we were known for, what we were all about. Obviously, benevolent care being those services provided for residents who outlive their resources. We actually surveyed our donor family in 2019, and an overwhelming majority of our resident donors felt like the foundation was benevolent care. That's what they knew us as. And we kind of looked at, when we were going into the strategic plan process, we kind of looked at philanthropy like market share. We kind of took a business approach, and we thought, our communities have so much more opportunity for charitable investment, but our residents weren't aware. They weren't aware of it because we didn't brand ourselves or market ourselves as a destination for philanthropy outside of benevolent care. Mm-hmm. And we knew that our residents were giving to their alma maters, to their kids' schools, their grandkids' colleges. We knew that they were investing in green efforts outside of our walls. We knew that they were investing in the Alzheimer's Association and brain health-oriented organizations outside our walls. But again, we weren't creating that platform or that environment or awareness for them to give within our communities. So we took that into account when we were developing our strategic plan. And we broadened our focus into key areas of focus beyond benevolent care. Now we have, obviously, again, benevolent care. We have capital projects that is, when you look at philanthropy across the country, according to the Philanthropy and Aging Services study put together by Martz and Lundy, capital is the #1 destination for philanthropy from older adults living in a nonprofit CCRC environment. So we broaden that within our brand and our outreach. So benevolent care, capital, associate scholarships and education. When we have our internal surveys of residents and our internal surveys of associates, the word that they use most frequently when describing the other is family. So we knew that there was a market for philanthropy when it came to, or an opportunity to grow philanthropy in our associate family when it comes to education and scholarships. We knew that was there. So we have benevolent care, capital, associate scholarships and education, innovation. We saw philanthropy going outside of our walls to organizations that were investing in philanthropy or investing in innovation and neat and creative ways to care for older adults. So we saw that opportunity in-house. And then finally, we call it special programs, which is really, if you can dream it, it fits within special programs. And it really incorporates everything from wellness or brain health efforts to ecology efforts, going green initiatives, outdoor landscaping, etc. It really kind of catches anything that isn't in those other key areas of benevolent care, capital, innovation, and associate scholarships and education. So again, we just kind of rebranded ourselves, broadened the opportunities, and yeah, we can talk a little later about how our team really focuses on relationships in order to identify the passions of a donor and then tie them to those key areas that I just referenced.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for explaining that. And I have to say, as a strategist, I love when an organization has a really just clear strategic plan. And a lot of times foundations, I will say, don't always, because they're focused on, kind of one or two areas. Benevolence, I think, capital projects are kind of the two areas we see most often in senior living. And the fact that you have this clear strategic plan and you use it to connect with donors to find out how to connect their passion, I think it's really, I imagine do you think that's the key to your success so far?
Oh yeah, when we first were talking through this, our board, appropriately so, raised up concerns as to whether or not we would cannibalize giving to benevolent care in order to help fund some of these other areas, and it's been quite the opposite. It's that rising tide, raising all ships, so to speak. We've seen growth in benevolent care pretty significantly right alongside the growth in those other areas of giving. It's definitely been a success for Asbury in general, because we're pulling in donors, having the intimate conversations about what really drives them. And then the fact that they can invest in their home now really has been a differentiator for us. That idea of investing in a scholarship where you're actually seeing the individual daily, walk in the hall, and that's the person you're impacting, rather than I gave it to a school. Not that that's a bad thing, but I gave it to a school that some kid that came, that's awesome. It's a neat story, but I can actually see firsthand that success story of that. Maybe it's the dining room server who's now the RN supervisor, which is literally a story at one of our communities. It's just it's a beautiful thing. It's something that I'm honored to be a part of.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're bringing true meaning to charity begins at home, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So Andrew, I want to hear from you. So you're the CFO of the organization. No surprise that you'd be a big proponent of all the things that JD and his team do, and of philanthropic efforts in general. But why? I understand that you really partner with JD, and you're out speaking to the team members about how to partner with the foundation team and things like that. Tell us why you're a big proponent, and how you help JD in his role.
Sure. Thanks. Well, I would tell you it probably first started when JD and I sit next to each other in the office. So we actually collaborate a lot, and we talk about the different things that he's trying to do. He gave you a good overview of the foundation over the last couple of years. And I'd probably say that, his foundation board also aligns with the overall company's board of directors. And as we were putting that strategic blueprint in place that he referenced, JD's team had already been thinking about that, a few years ahead of time. And for me, it's a pretty simple finance equation. You have a person come on board that works on his team. You might pay them $100,000 a year, and they set a target of you need 4 or 5 times your cost as an ROI to bring to the combined entity. And so that was the easy thing for me to see. But the other parts that you already heard JD talk about was, we don't do like bake sales and we give people pins for things. We've expanded outside of kind of the classic narrow focus to a lot of the programs that he mentioned. And it's really that aligning the donor's passion with what, they're trying to do. I think that's moved the needle significantly for us. And you heard that in his results. Classically, a few years ago, we might have been only 5 or 6 million in annual, fundraising, and now we're, over 10 easily. He's a little bit modest in that our actual portfolio that we manage is closer to $60 million. And, that's a pretty sizable portfolio that meets the needs of a lot of the things that JD and his team are putting together. So for me, it was easy to see. It was also look around, and we have a little bit of a captive audience within, the folks that come to our communities. And look, they really want their places to, grow, look nice, and JD and his team tap into that. And not every place is exactly the same. Some people at a particular location might want one thing versus another, but the programs and services that his team brings together, you can make them pretty the same over your different geographic locations, but then you tailor it for what's specific to the person that's there. And we'll probably talk about that a little bit later when we get into, hey, what are some, key large donor-funded things that, have been very successful here and the reasons for it. But it's really that combination of it's easy to see the return. It's easy to help me sell that to the rest of the organization as to why they should make the investment in those people to fundraise. And the results of they speak for themselves.
Yeah, they sure do. They sure do. So JD, you started in 2019. This strategic plan came into place in 2020. As you were kind of bringing the foundation to this new place that they're at, what are the obstacles internally, externally that you faced as you expanded that philanthropic mission?
Andrew, it's funny. Andrew mentioned bake sale. I think the biggest challenge our industry faces, and it's frustrating if I'm being completely transparent. we have so many organizations that have this bake sale mentality where they treat fundraising or foundation or development kind of at a different level than they might be investing in their operations. And it's when Andrew referenced kind of that ROI that he looks at, and I mentioned that stool, that three-legged stool, right? I implore our industry to really think differently about philanthropy, because you can easily monitor the results, right? You can see them firsthand, and I can't imagine that there's a CFO out there or a CEO out there that can identify a division within their organization that's returning 3.5, 4.5, 5.5 their investment. So for me, it doesn't make sense. Of course, I'm jaded towards the philanthropic world, but it doesn't make sense to me why our industry isn't more invested in philanthropy. We as an organization, and Andrew and I give each other a hard time a lot. We have our desks next to each other, but I really do value his support from a budget perspective, because it really has allowed us to expand our team, which has been critical in building a team that has close relationships with the donor family within each of our communities. That's been critical, because the foundation has grown as a resource. That's a word we like to use, as being a resource to our donors. So in order to be the best resource, we need to know what drives them. What is it that they're passionate about? And then where are their needs from a financial perspective, from a planning perspective? And it's really grown our offerings in ways that are pretty significant. We've had prior to the strategic plan being approved, we had not had a living donor give us a 7-figure gift. And since the strategic plan and the growth that we've been afforded through growing our budget a bit, we've had 10 7-figure gifts. So you can see that kind of it really has transformed the impact of philanthropy on the organization. And it's broadened kind of what we can offer. We're working with people before they even move into our communities to identify ways to help them move, to decrease or eliminate capital gains in the sale of property, fund an entrance fee, fund their monthly ancillary fees, et cetera. So we've really seen just a kind of a different level of impact within our industry with Asbury Foundation. It's been something that's just been exciting to be part of.
Yeah. So you mentioned the bake sale mentality, and does that mean, we used to have this discussion with our own foundation when I was in my last provider organization about events, galas, walks, and things like that. They take a lot of time, a lot of energy.
Yeah.
The return isn't necessarily huge, but there is some relationship building that goes on there too. But do you do events, or have you kind of cut them out?
We've reduced significantly the number of events that we do because of exactly what you just said. We're very data-driven foundation, and we looked at the data, and it showed us that for every solicitation that our development team makes, whether the donor says yes or no, so it doesn't matter, it's worth approximately $50,000 to the organization. So every time we're spending hours and hours organizing a carnation sale where you're going to get 30 cents for every dollar carnation you buy, it just the math doesn't add up when you could be developing that relationship and it equates to $50,000 to the organization, yes or no, from the donor. So that's the kind of data we used, and that's again why Andrew and the budget team and the finance team here have really been such great partners, because they're willing to say, hey, yeah, we're going to add a person. We know we can expect, X times 3.5 as a minimum, or 4.5 in terms of financial impact at that community. But that bake sale mentality, you mentioned, what's the hurdle? That's the biggest thing, because our industry, most of our communities in the nonprofit CCRC world started from churches or from religious organizations. And so that kind of same kind of mentality of, you need to have a Broda chair, let's have a bake sale or something to raise money for it. We've definitely taken a more sophisticated approach, and our industry is ready for that. It needs that.
Yes.
It's just they're slow to accept that, and that's something I hope changes soon.
Yeah, I hope.
Yeah, and
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, if I could just interject, we weren't exactly, we evolved too, right? Our foundation started, way back when, and I'd say in the last, 3 to 4 years, we've really had an acceleration in how we view things. And it's as simple as, from an operating budget perspective, the people that work on the foundation, they're embedded in the local CCRCs or life plan communities. And when you're looking to add another person, it's hard for the local executive director to say, well, I'm going to put another $100,000 in my budget. What do I get for it? And we use a simple metric that's used in our system called operating ratio. And all their expenses for those folks are in there, but they really weren't getting the credit for what I'll call the unrestricted gifts that JD and his team raised. And so even though they were doing it and they would get it in their operations, it was real cash, they didn't see it in their key metrics. So we just said, let's just change the metric and we'll give you credit for that. And then all of a sudden it was like a watershed event. Oh, okay, we'll do it. Even though everything that JD's been talking about, they were getting the benefit of that anyway, but it got more immediate acceptance across the system. And then I think that also led to being open to other ideas, outside of the classic, what does the foundation do to raise funds? And I think that's really accelerated and taken fire in a lot of our places. So, it's interesting if you just change a little metric, how all of a sudden people are behind you even more than they were before.
Yeah. And you're talking about the internal support that you got from your executive directors to allow
That's right.
JD staff to embed in their community.
Yep.
Yeah,
even though they were getting the benefit for it anyway, right?
Yeah, but it totally changed everything. Andrew, I appreciate you bringing that up, because we recognize that from a accounting perspective or an accounting perspective, you're usually not including philanthropic revenue in your operating ratios, but we've had enough consistency, we've had enough success over time that we had confidence in making that adjustment. And by doing so, to Andrew's point, the cultural shift that happened from, instead of the executive directors calling me up during budget time and saying, what the heck, you got all these costs in here. Now they're saying, they're joining me for dinners with a donor. They're sitting at lunch and they're calling our donors just to check in periodically, because these people are investing 7 figures into a brain health center for excellence, or 7 figures into endowing scholarships to grow nurses, and which is just a beautiful thing from a recruitment, retention, succession planning standpoint. So the partnership, again, not that they weren't good partners before, but it's just a whole new breath of fresh air when it comes to internal collaboration in building relationships with donors, because now we're seeing the OR metric have a direct impact on the local leadership team there. That's a really good point, Andrew. Appreciate you raising that.
Yeah, and thank you for mentioning budget, because that's where I want to go next. I'm curious, Andrew, about, how do you factor philanthropic support into your operating budget, right? Because we can be Pollyanna and put too much potential revenue in and then get caught flat-footed, or the opposite can happen. So how do you incorporate that into your budget? What are kind of some of your principles that you can share?
Sure. Well, we certainly evolved over the years in how we approach this, and I think I already told one of our secrets where the cost of JD's team is really in the local operating budget. And you've also heard that we've had some significant increases the last few years in the amount of funds raised. And when we say that, that's from all sources, whether they're restricted or unrestricted gifts. But when we budget, JD's team has an internal budget that he puts together, and it may be $10 million. I'm just using it as an example. And that's a combination of restricted and unrestricted gifts. And the restricted gifts sometimes are harder. They take a little bit longer to get. The unrestricted usually have a good flow of that. So we budget for the unrestricted amounts in our actual budgets, knowing that they're going to be out there trying to raise gifts that will be restricted. And, we've had some good successes over, many years where we always get a net that's greater than the unrestricted amounts. And so that's how we approach it. The people costs are all in there, and it's mostly what their costs are. They may travel, do some things like that, or hold some events. And everyone seems to be fine with that, and I think some of that is because they've experienced they usually get more than we budget from the unrestricted gifts, and there's always some larger restricted gifts. And JD already pointed out the 10 gifts with 7 figures that we really didn't have 3 years ago that we've gotten 10 of. And I think that builds upon itself. And so that's how we go about and do it.
Okay, thank you for that.
And Jen, if I can piggyback that, Andrew's raising up some good narrative for people to consider within our industry is that, that unrestricted budgeted figure is really helpful. But he mentioned that restricted column, that's the funding of capital projects, the funding of dog parks or ecology efforts, scholarships, etc. But there's also a permanently restricted column that has really been a focus of ours, and that's endowing. So any gifts that come in from an endowment perspective fit within that permanently restricted column, which just means perpetual funding, right? So we're not only focused on the immediate, we're focused on endowing those scholarships so that every year those funds are coming in on a regular basis. So while it's from a budget perspective, that year to year, paying attention to that bottom line, the unrestricted really is helping that. The long-term budget implications of perpetually funding scholarships, perpetually funding brain health and wellness programs. We actually have a donor that established an endowment that will create funding just for capital needs at one of our communities. So when you're talking about budget impact, it's not just the unrestricted dollars that are flowing through, but we're really laying foundations that'll impact Asbury for generations in terms of associate impact, capital impact, et cetera.
Yeah. We didn't talk about this yet, but when you talk about capital or innovation, I heard we'll talk about some of the types of projects, but do you fund things that are true operating expenses, or are your projects that you accept and fundraise for predominantly like starting things up, building things, more of the capital type needs?
Well, so we do have some endowments started to fund wellness and brain health positions to help underwrite some of that cost. While it's still in its infancy, it's growing, but that's something that donors, and much like a university will have endowments for like a professor or some role there. The same, like that, again, it's getting out of this, because we're a long-term care nonprofit world, we should think in this little box. It's really, we're not doing anything at Asbury that higher education isn't doing, or that some of our larger health systems are doing. I think our industry is intimidated by it. I think that's probably the best way to put it. And once you get rolling, though, once you get it rolling, it really just builds upon itself. It's if you ever read the book Good to Great, that by Jim Collins, it's that flywheel, right? That flywheel just starts moving and moving, and now you're having. Andrew mentioned a $60 million portfolio. A large portion of that is endowments, be it some is unrestricted, a good portion is unrestricted, but now we have restricted endowments that are funding those roles, that are funding those scholarships, that are funding those capital projects. So yeah, some operational, but heavily projects related perpetual funding that's happening.
Okay.
But I think it's fair to say that, like, one of the cores of the way we started is with benevolent care, which is what I would call an operations type thing each year.
Yeah.
If somebody outlives their means, part of our mission is, if you kind of do the right things, you apply, you qualify, we'll not have you leave the community, and we'll use that benevolent care money to help you do that. And to me, that's more of an operating item than it is like, hey, we're going to build a building or something like that. And that's part of our core. And I think it always will be. I just like the fact that we've added so many other things to it, where some people might turn away individuals because it doesn't meet that core. We're like, well, wait a minute, like what's wrong with having a scholarship for nurses or something else? That, those are good things to do. It a little more work, but it just grows upon itself.
Yeah, I agree.
And we're at about 50, I'd say about 50%-ish, give or take 10%, plus or minus, is the unrestricted funding. So we're still doing a significant, that's an overwhelming majority of the effort that the foundation is undertaking. But again, we're seeing that rise heavily because that tide that is all the key areas of focus that we present, people are giving to benevolent care, making sure that's still part of their annual giving or lifetime plans, but then they're adding some special project or special passion that they have as well to their estate gift or their plan gift or their major gift.
Yeah, love it. I love it. So I know we've talked a lot about residents being contributors to the work that you're doing. Is that the bulk of your contributions come from residents? Do you also get corporate or grant making organizations supporting your efforts?
That's a great question, and it's interesting because we do get the question a lot. Well, are you going outside our walls to raise money? And the reality is, again, going back to data, the return on investment, where are you spending your time, and what results are you getting? And that Philanthropy and Aging Services study that I referenced earlier that Marks and Lundy had done, it was a national study that really helped shape our strategic plan back in 2020. That showed that the overwhelming percentage of gifts to a community came from the residents. So if you're spending time outside of that, you're spinning your wheels. And the grant world, yes, we might get a few grants here and there. But if we're not spending time with the people living in our communities, getting to know them, getting to know where their passion is, what makes their heart beat every day, where do they find the most value in giving, that's where we spend our time, getting to know people and understanding where their passion is, and then sharing with them an opportunity to give at our community. We don't ask a lot for giving, because literally we've gotten to know people and we are sharing with them where the opportunities are, and they're kind of presenting to us some of the things that they'd like to do, and that makes it such a great partnership. And I applaud Andrew, I applaud our leadership team, and this is a key, I think, for our industry to be aware of, is there's got to be trust in that leadership and the communication with that leadership about what it is we're doing. When we can share a vision for brain health, when we can share where we see providing neurological, cognitive value to the older population, when we can show what we're doing as an organization around that, and somebody's passionate about it, we had 2 donors give $3 million plus just for brain health, because that's their passion. That's what they were giving to outside our walls. When they saw an opportunity to make that happen for their friends and neighbors living there in their community, they brought that idea up. They wanted to do something. So we really just aligned that passion and that drive that they had to the opportunity on the campus level. So Andrew's been a great ally. The leadership team here has been a great ally in building that trust that I referenced, and then again creating the environment where people can be a part of that progress that's happening at the campus level.
Perfect. Andrew, what do you have anything to add to that? And I'm kind of curious, do you involve your employees in contributing?
So JD is one of the first people to meet a new employee, give them a pledge card and say, hey, you want to sign up for whatever community you might want to give. We get down to that level with our employees, and a lot of
he's running into some trouble there. He's being somewhat facetious. Jim, we do engage associates, especially the leadership team in giving. They've been wonderful partners. Our board has been incredible in terms of their giving. But the reality is associates aren't necessarily driving the success. So while we do want to build that culture and give people an opportunity, the majority of our time is spent with residents. building opportunities with them and identifying their passions.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. So while we wait, I bet Andrew will pop back on as soon as his connection restores. Tell me about your favorite project that you've helped to fund.
By far, brain health. It's and of course they're all wonderful. Let me caveat and say that they're all fantastic. But the investment that has happened and has occurred at our communities around brain health has been absolutely amazing to see. It's been beautiful. We have one current, the Roseboro Wellness and Brain Health Center for Excellence that was built in 2022. I think it was our grand opening for that, and that Wellness and Brain Health Center includes a rock wall. It includes Rock Steady Boxing, which is a Parkinson's-related boxing program. Residents aren't boxing each other; they're working on balance. They're working on, technique and that connecting that synapse, or so that what you're envisioning and what you think is going to happen is translates into your limbs. It involves innovation and technology like exergaming, which is a giant kind of computer screen where you're testing reaction, memory, etc. This Brain Health Center was built at our community in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And again, we had our grand opening in 2022, and it inspired a donor to fund the same thing at our community up in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, and we expect to begin construction on that later this year. So those programs have just been absolutely incredible, and it's neat because you would think in our older adult population, our communities would have more of a presence around neurological disease, more engagement and programming around, enhancing your cognitive capabilities and actually working towards living a more excellent life as opposed to just, you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing. So brain health has been an area that has just really exploded for us. That's been amazing to see. And we're already seeing the impact. We've had enough time where now we're seeing data that's showing the benefits to our residents as they participate in the brain health programming within our centers for excellence.
I love that you didn't just build this great brain health center with all these great things, that you're actually measuring the impact that it's having, which I'm sure will lead to potentially more donors and more brain health centers on your campuses.
A close second, I would say, is our associate scholarships and support. There is nothing, I don't think, more beautiful when you witness an associate come back and express gratitude to our donor family, an associate, because they've been able to fund their education and become an RN supervisor, become an LPN, and not just impact their own growth, but also, that impacts their family, higher salaries, higher income. It's just a beautiful thing when you can see someone grow and know that the donors you work with have helped make that happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. Tell me about metrics. You mentioned you're data driven, and so if senior living executives are listening and they have their own philanthropic arm, what metrics do you measure, and do you recommend that others keep an eye on as it relates to philanthropy?
Yeah, and you heard Andrew kind of reference this a little bit earlier, and it's something that has helped us when it comes to increasing budget, growing the team, et cetera. We have a minimum 3.5 ROI requirement for our fundraising team, and that was based on, again, I keep referencing that Martz and Lundy study because it was a national survey of nonprofit communities that have a development or fundraising effort, and the median return on investment was 3.5. So at Asbury Foundation, we like to think that, we have higher expectations than the median. So we have a minimum requirement of 3.5 ROI, or else, it's a performance issue for us. And that helps. Again, if finance and accounting and our budget teams know that that's the expectation, they're much more willing to put that investment into growing the team. So that is our that's the biggest metric that I put forth. The team gets tired of hearing me say ROI, but that 3.5 individual ROI is critical. And then our events and our activities have to have a minimum of that. We try to get that same minimum with our events and activities. So if it's going to cost us, $50,000, we should be, raising at least the 175,000 from that event. So that's the minimum. We hope that we hit higher, because again, we like to think that we're working towards something better than the average. So those metrics are really what we lift up pretty significantly.
I love that you apply the same ROI to your events, and that's really smart. So congratulations on that. I think that's great. You just gave a lot of good advice in a short soundbite to our industry. So, if you were talking to senior living executives today, and hopefully you are. Hi, Andrew.
Hey.
Sorry about that, guys. I don't.
No.
We're 2 feet apart in different rooms.
No worries. That's what those internet waves do sometimes when they don't work for us.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
I'll give you a chance to tell me about your favorite project that Philanthropy has funded at Asbury.
Well, I probably have a couple, so sorry about that. Since I've been here, I saw the conclusion of a really nice, we call it the Rife Center at our Mechanicsburg location. It's a beautiful auditorium hall that's used for multi-purpose. It's really large. We've used it for, training. It's used for master services. It's used for a whole bunch of other things. I really like that one. Another large one we did up in our Erie, Pennsylvania campus was a pool. It was sort of the completion of a little bit more of the amenities for that place, and a lot of that money was raised through JD's team. And the final one was one he may have already mentioned, which was our first real brain health initiative at our largest campus, where we have this sort of boxing studio and climbing wall as part of the cornerstone of our next way of looking at how to offer wellness to our residents. And all three of those, I think, have been really interesting. The residents, most of them have liked it. Certain people are always like, why are you doing that? But when they get in there and they see it and you explain it to them, they really think like, wow, that's really cool. And they get used a lot. So those are probably my three favorite.
Awesome. The next question that we just spoke of was the metrics that would indicate success from a philanthropic effort. What metrics do you like to key in on? And JD mentioned, the 3.5 ROI that he holds his staff accountable to, both individually and then for events, which is awesome. Do you, as a CFO, do you have other metrics that you're looking at?
Well, so that is a key one for sure. But I also look at something I'll call duration. You always wonder if you're in a closed environment. You have residents, some come, some go. Can you keep going back to the same base of people and asking them more for each year? It seems to me like you walk into a situation, you see that, and you're like, how does that work? Well, JD and his team have done a really good job over many years, really letting people understand how their gifts can make a difference in the resident lives. And I think that's hard to do. It's not like you can't do it, but it's hard to do. And for me, if you have a continual level of giving from each one of your organizations, that's another sign of success. It won't show up as a 4 or 5, times X ROI. The fact that you can keep repeating that with people, I think is a testimony. And that's something I would tell folks that want to start with a philanthropic approach. Figure out a way to make that happen, because that ultimately is one of these real measures of success, that you have people that continue to give year over year.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And this last question is for both of you. And so we talked about how many senior living organizations, if they do any kind of development, it tends to be focused on the capital or sometimes on benevolence. And what guidance would you offer to folks that have been, myopic sounds negative, like I'm being critical, but I mean, it's just the way our industry has been structured. What guidance would you give them to think a little differently about this?
When JD and I have done presentations like this, one of the things I'll tell the folks in the room is just start somewhere. If you don't have, a real long history of a foundation or a philanthropic purpose, start someplace, even if it's as corny as the bake sale or the event. Just get that going, get it into your DNA, and then grow upon it. I think that's one of the things that if you keep doing that, it'll really help, push things forward. And then it'll lead to other things like it did for us. We're not just raising money singularly for benevolent care or one specific, capital campaign. But you also want to tie that into what JD and his team have done, which is to tie into that donor passion. Like, what's important to you? And you heard JD talk about even prospective residents they'll talk to. They're not even here yet. And I think that pulls them in ultimately to the purpose, but maybe also into the community where if you don't take that approach, you might, miss out on something. So, start somewhere, grow upon it, and, listen to what your residents tell you are their passions.
Yeah, thank you. JD?
Yeah, I the only thing I'll add to that is take the leap. Start thinking of philanthropy as a revenue generating division rather than a kind of side group here that if they can raise a little bit here or there, it'll make an impact. Rather, be purposeful with it. Invest. Get that division operating with that minimum ROI expectation attached to it, but start investing and grow, and then don't be afraid to think big, think outside the box with this. Andrew mentioned the prospective residents. That our marketing and sales teams are partners with the foundation. We're not soliciting future residents, but we're in front of them talking about some of the vehicles that might help them move to our community. And even if people don't work alongside of us, it creates that culture of resource that the foundation is here, not just having our hand out as an ask, but actually able to help people fulfill their goals from a financial, tax perspective, et cetera. It's just a cultural shift. And if you're, Andrew's saying just take that first step. But unless you're willing to invest and really put serious effort into a really lucrative division within your organization, you're going to miss out on so much opportunity for impact at your communities. Again, I mean, we're talking about a difference. We've more than doubled what we've done in the past because Andrew and the leadership team here have been willing to invest and grow the team. So yes, take that first step, but then start thinking differently. Don't think like you're just on the side of a sidewalk with a bake sale. Think that you can actually help someone make a transformational impact at your community, and it'll make amazing operational and impact on your organization.
Yeah, I love.
And I would say, Jennifer, just from what JD's talking about, if you look at the not-for-profit senior living world, it's very collegial. If you want to start this or you're not sure, reach out to somebody that has a good, foundation like an Asbury and ask for some help. Yeah. And I think sometimes if people do that, they'll learn from our mistakes or learn from what we've done, and you'll get better faster. We're always willing to help. So I think that's another thing we always tell people, hey, give us a call. We'll try to tell you what we think will work.
I love that. I'm going to ask you for your contact information in just a second, and we'll be sure to link it
Sure.
in the show notes. But thank you for that offer, and I agree with you. Senior living as an industry is collegial. I mean, we are always trying to, I think, help each other to be better in all the right ways. So this is awesome. JD, one other question: when it comes to meeting your residents and their passions, you mentioned that you surveyed your residents, and I'm curious, how often do you do that? Is that a regular practice?
It's not regular. We did it at the genesis of our strategic plan efforts. We wanted to see kind of where people viewed us, what our brand was among our primary donor family, and it is something that we do periodically. I would say on a biannual basis is probably where we're at currently. But we're so heavily invested in the relationship process that we're always in front of our donors. We're having drinks with them. We're going to golf. We're playing rounds of golf, or we're going to breakfast, lunch. We're spending time with our residents on such a regular basis because we've been able to invest in having somebody at each of the communities. So we're pretty well connected to the pulse of our communities. But from a survey perspective, we're probably doing that every 2 years at this point.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure, and just to be clear, I'm sure you're also surveying them on or resident satisfaction and things like that. I meant specific to the philanthropic mission and the projects.
Yeah, and that's philanthropically, we're probably on the biannual, but we're regularly surveying our residents when it comes to quality metrics, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you so much. All right, as we wrap up, any final words, anything I didn't ask about that either of you want to share?
I'll just emphasize, don't be afraid to grow. Don't be afraid of the philanthropic dollars that can come your way, and just think differently. Think outside the box, and there's so much opportunity out there if you're just willing to invest a little bit of time and energy into it.
Good advice. And Andrew, I love something that you brought up earlier that I'll just say as it relates to that growth, which is don't be afraid, it sounds like, to invest in the right people to be your development team, because you find the right person and it's going to result in 3 to 4x, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, really is. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I want to thank both of you, JD Shuman and Andrew Jeanneret, from Asbury Foundation and Asbury Group, respectively. Thank you guys for being my guests today on Senior Living Visionaries. I really am excited about what you all are willing to share with our industry around philanthropy, because you have taken it in a very inspirational direction, and I hope that we all learn from you, because we are all, you're rising, all boats rise the tides at your foundation, but you're also helping to rise the tide of our industry. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having us, Jennifer.
Yeah,
thanks so much for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
You bet. And so, JD, and let's go with you first. Tell us how we should contact you. What's the best way to contact you?
Sure. So my email here is jshuman, SHUMAN, @asbury.org. And you can reach me there anytime. That's probably the best way to get me.
Okay. And your website is asburyfoundation.org?
Yeah, so www.theasbury.org is our website. Yeah, we're about to finish a quiet phase of a 100-year anniversary campaign, so you'll see a lot of exciting information on there, not just about our strategic plan, but for how philanthropy is going to shape the next 100 years here at Asbury.
Thank you, and we'll link all that information in the show notes. And I want to also mention the key areas of focus are well defined on your website as well, in case anybody wants to go back and review that. And Andrew, how would we reach you?
So same naming convention, A. Jeanneret, JEANNERET @asbury.org.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you both so much. Great. I'm Jennifer Drago, and you've been listening to Senior Living Visionaries podcast, where we explore cutting-edge ideas and breakthroughs shaping the future of the senior living industry. Please subscribe to be notified each time an episode drops at seniorlivingvisionaries.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Senior Living Visionaries podcast and radio show, where we showcase the leaders and innovators in the industry who are pushing the boundaries and setting the stage for the future in senior living and services. Join us next time as we share the bold ideas and breakthroughs of the industry's most forward-thinking leaders here on Senior Living Visionaries.